So as a summary, deductive argument is an argument if we assume that the premise is true, it is impossible for the conclusion to be false. While inductive argument is if we assume that the premise is true, it is improbable or probable for the conclusion to be false. And the relationship between premise and conclusion is, in case of deductive argument, is a matter of necessity, whereas the relationship between premise and conclusion in case of inductive argument is a matter of probability. Therefore, in case of deductive argument, the conclusion follows the premise with certainty or absoluteness, while in case of inductive argument, the conclusion follows the premise with likelihood. Again, if an argument is deductive, we can evaluate it as by saying valid or invalid. And if an argument is inductive, we can evaluate it as by saying strong or weak. Therefore, an argument or a deductive argument is valid if we assume that the premise is true, it is impossible for the conclusion to be false. Whereas if a deductive argument is invalid, cancel this one. If we assume that the premise is true, it is possible for the conclusion to be false. And in case of inductive argument, an argument is strong if we assume that the premise is true, it is high probable for the conclusion. Sorry, it is improbable for the conclusion to be false. Or the conclusion has high probability to be true. Whereas if inductive argument is weak, if we assume that the premise is true, it is probable for the conclusion to be false. And you shouldn't forget that validity is not a matter of actual truth value of a statement, rather than it is a matter of form. And strength or weakness is not a matter of actual truth value of statements, rather a matter of degree. Strength or weakness in case of inductive argument, and validity in case of deductive arguments. Hence, you should have to bear in mind that there is no direct relationship between truth value and validity, as well as truth value and strength or weakness of an argument. Furthermore, we can evaluate arguments by saying valid deductive argument by saying sound or unsound, whereas all invalid arguments are unsound, and inductive strong arguments by saying cogent or uncogent, whereas all uncogent arguments are, all weak arguments are uncogent. So for a deductive argument to be sound must fulfill two criteria. That means it should have a valid argument plus all actually true premises. And if it fails to fulfill the above criteria, it is always unsound. Whereas in case of inductive argument, cogent argument must fulfill two criteria. That is strong, it should be strong, and it should consist of all actually true premises. And if it fails to fulfill the above criteria, it is uncogent. Therefore, we can say that all sound arguments are valid arguments, and in case of inductive argument, all cogent arguments are strong arguments. And all invalid arguments are unsound arguments, and all weak arguments are uncogent arguments. And valid arguments can be unsound depending on the actual truth value of its statement. That means If the argument is valid and has a false premise, it can be unsound. Whereas, in case of inductive argument, a strong argument can be uncogent depending on the actual truth value of statements. That means, if the argument is strong and has false premise, it can be uncogent. In conclusion, evaluating deductive and inductive arguments involves understanding validity, truth, soundness, strength, and cogency. And deductive arguments are either valid or invalid based solely on their structure or only on their structure, while inductive arguments are strong or weak based on the probability of their conclusion. Thank you for watching me again. If you find this video helpful, guys, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep questioning and analyzing the arguments around you. Have a nice time.